All right, I think I'm live again, although, yes, there we go. Um, hey guys, it's Andrew. I apologize for the technical difficulties. In case you didn't notice, I'm not in our normal place, the Unison headquarters in New York City. Instead, I am in rural Pennsylvania, just for a change of scene and a change of pace. But unfortunately, the Wi-Fi is less potent here. And in case you didn't notice, if I veered to the left or right, I also have this horrifying Nutcracker statue directly behind me with his eyes boring into the back of my skull. So I attribute the technical difficulties to his murderous, pitiless gaze. Um, I just wanted to take a moment to go back through that first part, since I started the last section kind of in the middle because I thought it hadn't been cut out. So anyway, here we go. I just want to start from the beginning and just explain kind of the intro before I jumped into pitching and doing your own publicity. And again, just to reiterate how publicity has changed in the last 5 or 10 years, and now it is entirely appropriate for artists to go directly to media and pitch themselves without the traditional gatekeepers of publicists or publicity departments. However, in order to get those results, it is even more important to know the best practices. And so that's what I was running through. But again, I just want to reiterate as well that it is, before you can do any kind of publicity, you still really need to know your story, and you need to have not only that sort of high level brand story that I've talked about, the 1, 2, 3 words and emotions that you want people to feel when they encounter you, when they hear your name or see your face. But you also really want to whittle down the story points, the musical and the extra musical story points, so that you have them in single sentences. So again, if you are musically, like if you are a pianist who only plays contemporary pieces with prepared piano, that's a musical story point. If you are a violinist who alternates between Baroque, historically informed Baroque performance, and whipping out an electric violin and just rocking with rock bands, then that's a musical story point. Extra musical, again, if you are obsessed with bunnies and everywhere you go to a shelter and play violin for a bunny, that's an extra musical story point. If you build and ride motorcycles, extra musical. If you cook multi-layer cakes all the time, that's extra musical. So you want to have those things broken out into the most concise sentences, and so you just want to be thinking about that. You want to be talking to your friends about it, and trying to really refine and whittle down what is core to your artistic DNA and musical DNA, and then what are some things that are core to you as a person, that are interesting about you as a person. And I say talk to people about it because what's most interesting to you might not be most interesting to most people. So very important to be thinking about that. And then as I sort of was jumping into it with the last stream that came up, you then want to take those musical story points, and that's what you want to give to the PR departments of the venues where you're performing, or the promoters of those concert tours, those concert performances, the opera houses where you might be singing. You want to talk to their PR and marketing department and talk them through those different story points, so that they not only get an understanding for you as a person, but feel invested in you and really feel connected to your story and your story points. So that's something that I sort of was leading into and talking about in the intro, and I think just something important that I wanted to emphasize, because it connects what we've been talking about for the last few sessions, particularly with branding and with the storytelling and how you develop that storytelling, and then now this is about how you put it into work, into effect, through promoting yourself and publicizing yourself. And so you take those story points, and you either through the PR or marketing departments of a of a place that you're performing at. You get them to translate that into media stories, or through pitching on your own and actually digging up contacts, sending them emails with around one of those story points, the one that might be most of interest to them, and using that as the sort of basis by which you then actually start to execute your publicity. So again, and thinking with media outlets, like if somebody is going to be interested in a musical story but not an extra musical story point, being able to really tailor them to the people that you're speaking with, and show the validators of them too. So I just wanted to make sure that the introduction to that live stream was not simply left in the ether or to your imaginations, and to apologize for this asshole ruining the technological side of things. But I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks as always for tuning in. Take care, be well, stay safe. Hello, I am not sure what happened there. I hope I'm back now. Yeah, okay, I think I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm not actually sure exactly where I cut off. I was talking for a while about refining the story, and so I want to, again, focus on promoting performances. So to promote a performance, you want to, first off, create an email that contains your story points, your promotional angles, those 3 to 5 musical and extra musical story points in very concise single sentences with validators. You want to have a link to your high resolution photos, your promo photos, your text of your bio, all of those things. And you want to prepare that, and then you want to, once you can get a contact at the PR marketing departments of the presenter or the venue of a performance that you're putting on, I would say around 6 to 8 weeks out from that performance, you want to send an email to that publicity department, whoever the contact is, the head of publicity, the head of marketing. You write that email and you introduce yourself. You say, hello, I'm Andrew. I'm performing at your venue in the next, 6 or 8 weeks from now, July 15th. And I just wanted to be in touch and see how I can help promote this concert. I'm happy to do any kind of publicity or interviews, any sort of social media takeovers, live streams, etc. And you want to just phrase that email. You want to offer to help, not to sort of pressure them into helping you. And then you say, below are some story points around me that might be helpful, as well as links to some assets, some videos I've done, some recent interviews or reviews, and then you send that to them. And you try to, you also want to finish that by saying, I'd love to have a call, get together if you're in person, if you're in the same place, and you send that to them. And if you don't hear back, you can follow up gently in a couple of weeks. You can just go into your sent email folder and find that email and reply to it again to them and just say, hi, I just wanted to follow back up on this and see if you'd be interested in having a phone call to discuss how I can help promote this this event, this performance, this opera run. And then hopefully that will activate them. And basically you want to get them interested in you and feel an emotional connection to you. And then you also want to get them clear on what are the interesting story points around you. So again, if you have a very specific approach to the piano that, you always play, the piano with, one hand first, and then you bring in your other hand when you're warming up, or you go for 6-mile walks along the highway before performing in order to clear your mind. You want them to have all of those story points to hand so that they can think, oh, there's a writer in the local newspaper who loves to go for walks. We'll reach out to him. I think he'd have an interesting time interviewing you. Or, there's a great outlet that, a TV show that's all about puppies, and you love puppy dogs, and you go to shelters every place you play. You go to the shelter in that city. And they might then easily be able to think about media that they can secure for you. But if you don't get much of a response, or they're just too busy to help, or you just get the sense that they're not really going to do much, then, or they don't have a PR department. If it's a smaller presenter, a smaller venue, they might not have people dedicated to publicity. You can always offer to do it yourself. And again, this is such an important point that it is totally fine for artists to reach out to media at this point. And you don't have to hesitate, or you don't have to feel weird about doing that. It is de rigueur. So you can, if you're in touch with somebody and they just say, listen, I can't do this, I don't have time, then it is absolutely no problem to ask them, do you have a list of media outlets or writers or producers in the region that I could reach out to? Ask them. If they give it to you, that saves you a lot of work. If they don't have it, then you can do the research yourself. And the best way is, you can Google. If you're playing in Kalamazoo, you can say classical media Kalamazoo, or classical music Kalamazoo, opera Kalamazoo, and see what comes up in the search results. Go over to the news tab, see what articles have been written recently. See who covers what the local radio station, the local newspaper, if they have a writer who covers music, if there are blogs that cover the arts or music or performing arts, if there are TV stations where there's a program that sometimes brings in musicians or artists who are coming through town. All of that research you can find on Google just by checking, basically Googling all of those things that I just said. And then trying to find the contacts. And again, that just takes a little bit of Google stalking. Usually you can get an email or a contact form at least. Twitter, reaching out on social media like Twitter, Facebook, that can get a little creepy. So check out the person's general feed on social media first before you do it, and see if they're open. They talk about soliciting, saying, hey, reach out to me. If so, then you can reach out to them. If not, try to stick to email or contact forms. Once you have these contacts, then how you actually pitch is what we'll talk about next. People also, I'm going to pause for a minute. People ask about press releases a lot. You don't really need them, frankly. At this point, that's not really a big generator of publicity, unless you're the Metropolitan Opera or the New York Philharmonic. Then you put out press releases. As an artist, it doesn't really matter. You just want to have your story points down. That is more important than any kind of press release. When you are pitching media, you find a contact and you write them an email, and the subject line is probably the most important part of this, because that will define if they open it or they don't. And the subject line has got to tell the story that you are trying to get them to tell. And it has got to be only information that will be of interest to them. So if they don't know your name, don't put your name in the subject line. If they're probably not going to be aware of who you are, be more descriptive. Again, if you are a violinist who loves puppies and goes to a shelter everywhere you play in order to spend some time with socializing puppies, then you don't want to say acclaimed violinist Billy Jackson coming to Jacksonville. You want to say violinist who plays with dogs and plays for dogs in Jacksonville. Something like that. Something very short, but that lets them know you're coming to their city, or you're in their city. It lets them know what the story point is, what you think they might be interested in, and that's it. All killer, no filler. And then you get to the email and you can just introduce yourself, say, dear Steve, I'm a violinist who is coming to perform with the Kalamazoo Symphony, and I just wanted to see if you might be interested in the story. I love dogs. I can't have a dog because I travel too much to perform, but everywhere I go, I make sure to visit each shelter that I can. And I'm planning to go to the Jacksonville or the Kalamazoo shelter on Tuesday, and I was wondering if you might be interested in joining me in writing a story about how musicians can stay connected on the road and find companionship and nourish their souls while touring so much. That's a pitch I just made up right now, but you can see how it tells them a story that they could want to tell, and it gives them a clear direction in that regard to say, okay, here's when we can do it, here's what we might do, would you be interested? And in terms of validators, if you can say, there was an article about this in Parade magazine or something you can read here. You want to always share if you think it will be valuable. There can be a thin line in that you don't want to share directly competitive pieces that were written in maybe another similar newspaper, because they might not want to tell a story that's already been told. But if it's a completely different media realm, like here's a radio interview I did about how I love dogs, or a podcast or something like that, and you're pitching a newspaper writer, that's fine. That shows that the story has legs, has weight. But you want to tailor that email to each contact. And again, this is where it's important to think about musical versus extra musical story points. If there's a blog where the writer is hugely knowledgeable about violin music, then you don't want to go to that person and say, hey, I like puppies. You want to write a story on me about puppies? That's probably not a great pitch to them. But if you go to them and say, I'm a violinist, but I take a very specific approach to repertoire. Like I only play completely contemporary music or Baroque music. These are the two forms that I think actually have the most relevance to modern society. Whatever your pitch might be, your musical sort of DNA angle, you want to go to them with that, because that's what they're going to be interested in. If you go to a TV producer who all of their stories are about animals and human interest and the what's hot for Valentine's Day, if you go to them and say, I'd like to talk to you, maybe come onto the show and talk about rigorous violin repertoire preparation, you're probably not going to get a yes. Where if you go to them with puppies, you might well get a yes. So tailor each email to each contact and think, what are they going to be interested in? Musical, extra musical, etc. You send that email, and you can follow up, but you can follow up no more than twice. You should wait 1 to 2 weeks, and then again, go into your sent emails, find that email, reply to it, and say, Dear Steve, I just wanted to follow up and see if there might be any interest in this. Thanks so much for your time. And then 2 weeks after that, you can reply yet again and just say, hi, Steve, just one last check-in. If there's interest, let me know. I'd love to, talk to you about puppies. Thanks so much. And then that's it. And then you let it go. Not every pitch is successful. Sometimes you can pitch a lot of people around a campaign, around a performance, and you get nothing. But sometimes you can pitch a lot of people and get a lot of publicity. So don't get discouraged. Don't take it personally. Keep trying. But if you do that, then you will certainly not do harm if you follow that kind of regulation, that kind of plan. So that's how you pitch. And one thing I'll say as well, especially now, you think outside of the box. Feel free to think outside of the box. You don't have to just pitch for interviews or for reviews for somebody to come to your performance and give a critical review of it. Everything is online now. So you can pitch for digital content. You can say, if you go to that TV host and say, I have an amazing video of me performing for a ton of dogs and they're all responding. I played them this beautiful piece on the violin that was sort of written by a dog lover, and they're just sitting there wrapped. And if you send them that and say, we've shot this, a couple friends and I shot this, I haven't, given it to anybody, would you be interested in premiering it? Or if it's like a TV outlet, you can say, would you be interested in putting this on air? Or if there's a huge social media account for that local market that, again, deals with fun videos or heartwarming videos, you could reach out to them and say, hey, I have a great video. I'm coming to play. I'll go visit a dog shelter. Would you be interested in posting this, sharing this? There are a million other examples of that. You could do an Instagram takeover. You could do a Facebook Live where you go and perform for dogs. You want to always be trying to think of new ideas, of ways that you can, again, leverage the reach of other people to tell your story or tell one of your story points. So that's it. But again, I think one of the most important things also is to let it go after a certain point. If you push too hard, it can be worse than not pushing at all. We all know some of the artists or some of the people in our lives who are constantly self-promoting, and they might get some publicity in the short term, but in the long term, it is hugely damaging to a brand to be perceived as somebody who is constantly pushing. So there is a fine line, and you want to never cross that line. But this kind of outreach, if you have a good story and you're trying to get people to tell it and you're doing it in this way, you will never, nobody is going to be like, hey, screw you, don't ever reach out to me again. If you do your research and do, email, communicate with them in a sort of focused and respectful way, they're never going to be angry at you. So that's pitching. Integrating with social media. This is something that we'll talk a lot more about social media. We'll do an entire session on social media. But for now, I want to talk about how you represent publicity on your social platforms, how you share these press hits. People often ask, it feels self-promotional to, if I do an interview or if I get a good review, to post that on my social platforms. Yeah, it absolutely is, but that's kind of the point of social media. But there are ways to do it. So if you do a great interview, you should absolutely share that. That shows momentum. That gives a sense of interest and investment in your career by people. So that is incredibly valuable for your fan base, your following, to know. But you always want to be humble. You never want to brag and say, oh, this was the best interview, man. I killed this interview. You want to say something like, I'm so grateful to the, Minnesota Tribune for interviewing me about my upcoming performance, or it was so amazing to be on local TV in Houston talking about my love of dogs and how I, play violin to dogs. You want to be humble and grateful, but share it. Be proud of it. Coverage is important. Pull out, if you get a great review and there's an amazing pull-out quote, then you can share that and say, again, with gratitude, with kind of awe at that people are enjoying your music making. But that's fine to post it. Don't post 20 back-to-back. Post the best ones and for reviews and pull-out quotes, because otherwise you can start to toe that line of being too proud of yourself or too self-promotional. But one or two is fine. Couple here and there is good. One thing with pull-out quotes, elide them so that they read clearly, so it's not just kind of comes in the middle of nothing, or they reference a hymn that doesn't have a clear reference point. You can put in brackets, your name or the name of the person you're collaborating with that they're referring to in the context of the article. Don't go crazy with that elision. If somebody wrote about you and said, she did a fantastic job of reminding me why I should jump out of a moving train every time I listen to her play, then you don't want to cut that down to, quote, fantastic. Just don't do that. People do that and it's terrible. Respect the intentions of the writer, but do so in the way that is most clear and most favorable to you. Best practice, you should also, if you're sharing a link, you should always check how it's going to look on your social platforms. Google the Facebook debugger or the Twitter card validator, and you plug the link in and you'll be able to see a preview of what it will look like on your platforms. Always do that. Instagram stories, if you've got over 10K followers, make a story and swipe up. Otherwise, put the link in the bio. Never put a direct link in the copy of a feed post for Instagram, because it doesn't link out. It just looks dumb. So post with best practices, and again, we'll do an entire session on that later. But it is worth posting. And as I said before, it is always worth, when you're speaking to PR and marketing departments, to pitch yourself for social media initiatives as well as publicity, and say, if they have a good Instagram account, you can always say, I'd love to do a takeover. If they have a good Facebook account, you can say, like, do you guys ever do Facebook Live performances or interviews? I'd love to participate. So those are some ideas of how to sort of cross-pollinate from publicity you do to the social media that you own and run. A couple of other things, media monitoring, analytics, stuff like that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but if you don't have a Google alert set up on your name, as soon as this is done, go do that. If you don't have Google Analytics set up on your website, as soon as this is done, go do that. If you don't know or aren't comfortable reading your social media analytics or insights, then take some time, this weekend, go through Facebook, Instagram insights, read articles. There's 1.5 million articles on these things, but you want to understand what these numbers mean, what this data means in terms of the success or lack of success of the content that you're putting out there and the things that you're sharing. So those are some ways to also just monitor and understand the impact of what you're doing. And we'll talk more about that in a later session too. One last point that I want to make before I close out here is, a lot of people ask about, when to hire a publicist, or, what that means. And a lot of people come to us and say, hey, we'd like to hire you. And after a conversation, we go back and say, listen, we love what you do, but it doesn't make sense for you to hire us right now. If you want to give us money, cool, that's fine, give us money, but we're not going to, do your publicity, because it's not worth your money at this point. And that's not a negative against them, but it is simply a fact, I believe anyway, that you don't need publicity always. You don't need it at every stage of your career. Most people. Some people do. Some people start, on a rocket ship, and they constantly need help and refinement and publicity because they have enough going on. That's the tiny, tiny minority. So, you should hire a publicist when there is too much work to do. If you're doing your own publicity and it gets too busy for you, good. Then you pay somebody to take that off your hands. You should hire somebody to help refine your story. You should hire a publicist if you're going to be in a major market and they know the contacts there. They have relationships and leverage with those contacts and an expertise in how to pitch them. Then that can be valuable. If you have a huge number of important performances, then it's worth having somebody come in to make sure that every performance is maximized, the publicity around it, and that it's all done in a kind of integrated, overarching way. Those are some reasons to hire a publicist. There are also unquantifiable elements, more sort of amorphous. And, for instance, when publicists have an offhand mention of you to somebody, even if they're talking about something else, they say, oh, by the way, you should really check this person out. They're amazing. Or, backstage discussions at concerts where they bring up your name and start to talk about projects that you've got. These things are very difficult to track and to be aware if they are happening. But over time, that is the glue that kind of cements the growth of a public figure. Those kinds of conversations that pave the way for direct, focused pitches to those media outlets or those producers or writers that will then actually get the successful feature story placement, TV interview, whatever. That obviously depends, the effectiveness of that kind of random talk or sort of less direct pitching conversations. It depends on the circles that the publicist moves in, etc. But that's a big part of sort of ongoing PR. And I think in terms of hiring, something else you should consider is where are you at? And again, many younger artists come asking to hire us because they just hear about publicity, or their manager says, oh, you should think about publicity. But they don't know what they're going to get out of it. And this is another reason why I encourage artists to do their own publicity, to try doing these things that I've just talked about. Because if you do it and you learn what goes into it and you have some measure of success, which you will, if you do this enough, you will, it is a lot easier to know what you are hiring someone for. Because again, people come to me and say, I want to hire a publicist. And I say, why? What do you want to achieve? And they're like, I don't know, get more famous? Maybe. And that's not enough. That you need to understand what it is and what somebody will be doing for the money you'll pay them. Because it's not going to be a little bit of money. It's going to be a significant investment. So when you've done it, then you understand what it is, and you understand when they're doing it well or poorly, and you can hold them accountable. So another sort of hiring concerns, there's the difference between campaign and ongoing. So if you just have one performance or a tour or a recording release, then you would just hire a publicist for a discrete period of time. If you have just a consistent number of dates every year that are important, that need publicity, you can hire somebody in an ongoing retainer capacity, a monthly retainer. It should be less money than if you were hiring them for a campaign, because you're doing so for a longer period of time. But still, that is only worthwhile if you have enough happening to justify that fee, and they can deliver enough consistent results to justify that. There's also a question: are they going to work on your social media or not? Our philosophy is, with almost all of our clients, we do publicity for, we also do their social media, because it's just a core founding tenet of our company that you can't do publicity and social media in silos. They must be integrated, and they must be support and augment each other. So, but not every publicity company has that philosophy. That's fine. But you want to know, are they going to do it or not? How are the two going to relate to each other? And then lastly, most publicists or publicity companies, ours included, we do hourly consulting. So if you don't need full-time PR or a full-time campaign even, then you can at least talk in an hourly capacity and get advice, get guidance, put a strategy in place for you to do your own PR, to refine your story, etc. And that will vary from publicist to publicist, but that's always something to ask about. If you like what somebody does and you think that they might be able to help you in some ways, that's always worth reaching out and seeing if they'll do that. And it's a way lower investment, and as I've said, can get great results. So those are some of the ways you can publicize yourself. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. This video has now been split into two halves, but such is life, such is the nature of the internet here in northern Pennsylvania with my buddy. But I hope this has been useful. If you have any questions from this, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have topics that you want me to talk more about, recordings is something we'll talk about in a future session as well. It's something I get asked about a lot. It's kind of its own beast, how you promote a recording properly or not properly, and so on. We'll go into social media. We'll dive into a lot of these other things. But I think that's a really important topic of just how to pitch and how to promote yourself effectively as an artist. So I hope this has been useful. As always, I hope you guys have a great long weekend, whatever the hell a long weekend is in the current moment. And as always, thank you guys for doing what you do, for persevering through this difficult time. We'll get through it. We'll get through it together, and we'll find a brighter light on the other side of this thing. Thank you guys so much. Have a great one.